Are you ready to be amazed? We've got the top 5 cold cases finally solved in 2023. And trust us, number 1 and 2 are gonna leave you speechless. Get ready for some mind-blowing revelations as we dive into these mysteries and uncover the secrets that have been hidden for decades. You won't want to miss this thrilling journey into the world of cold case investigations. Welcome, and let's get started. Number 5. DNA on cigarette butt solves 1971 teacher murder case. It was the summer of 1971 when Rita Curran decided to strike out on her own. The 24-year-old second grade teacher had just moved into a house with 3 strangers she barely knew. She was working as a maid at a local motel and studying for her graduate courses at the University of Vermont. Life was just beginning to open up for her, but everything changed one dark July night. As the clock struck midnight, something unspeakable happened. Rita was violently murdered in her apartment. Her body was found the next day, strangled, beaten, and sexually assaulted. The killer had left no traces, no clues, and no witnesses. The murder sent shockwaves through the city of Burlington. People who once left their front doors unlocked now feared for their lives. The police investigated hundreds of tips, but the killer remained at large for years. Who could have done such a thing, and why? The mystery of Rita Curran's murder haunted the town for decades, and the killer's identity remained a secret, shrouded in darkness and fear. For over 5 decades, the murder of Rita Curran had remained a haunting mystery. But in 2019, the Burlington Police Department reactivated the case and placed a team of detectives on the investigation, led by Lieutenant Detective Commander Jim Tribe. They knew forensic evidence would be crucial to solving the case, given its age. Key pieces of evidence had been kept in storage, including a Lark cigarette butt found on the floor next to Curran's body. In 2014, this and other items were sent to a forensic lab in New York City for DNA testing, but the results didn't match anyone in the national database of felons, nor the police's 13 main suspects. Years went by, but the detectives didn't give up. In 2022, they sent more evidence, including Curran's clothes, to a lab in Florida for new DNA extracting techniques. They also turned to genealogy testing to expand their search. And then, a breakthrough. CeCe Moore, a scientist and genealogy expert, was able to match the DNA on the cigarette butt to William DeRoos within hours of research. The news was stunning. DeRoos had been a stranger to Curran, but now the evidence suggested that he had brutally murdered her. DNA testing of Curran's housecoat at the lab in Florida confirmed DeRoos had indeed committed the crime. But as detectives closed in on DeRoos, a new question emerged. How had he evaded justice for so long, and what other secrets might his DNA reveal? DeRoos had been a suspect for years in the Rita Curran murder case, and detectives had even questioned him at the time of the crime. His marriage to Michelle DeRoos just before the murder raised suspicions, especially when Michelle revealed that her husband had a criminal history and warned her not to mention his absence on the night of the murder. But the investigation took a shocking turn when detectives learned that DeRoos had fled to Thailand and become a monk. Later, he resurfaced in San Francisco and married Sarah Hempting, who shared chilling stories of his violent past. Despite his death from a drug overdose in 1986, detectives were left with lingering questions about the full extent of DeRoos' crimes and potential victims, and whether his DNA could uncover even more secrets. Though the Rita Curran case was finally solved, the impact of DeRoos' actions would continue to haunt the town of Burlington for years to come. Number 4. Cold case team solves decades-old murder in Livingston County. Livingston County, Michigan has been rocked by the revelation that the nearly 40-year-old murder case of Christina Lynn Castigline has finally been solved. The cold case team, who's been working tirelessly to find justice for Castigline, was finally able to identify her killer. Unfortunately, the suspect already passed away in 1983. Castigline was just 19 years old when she disappeared while walking westbound on 5 Mile Road near Lola Park in Redford Township. Despite her cheery and friendly disposition, she hadn't been seen since that night. Her mother reported her missing 2 days later, and her body was found in the Oak Grove State Game area on Fawcett Road in Deerfield Township just 8 days after her disappearance. The discovery of her partially clothed body lying in a remote wooded area shocked the community. It was determined that she had been strangled to death and sexually assaulted, and it was believed that her body had been left in the location shortly after she was last seen in Redford. Evidence indicated that her body had been there before the heavy snowfall and the start of the snow melting. Despite an extensive investigation, the case went cold, and it seemed like justice would never be served for Castigline. However, the cold case team in Livingston County never gave up on finding the truth. With advances in DNA technology, they were finally able to identify a suspect. Unfortunately, the suspect in question had already passed away in 1983. However, the closure of this case has brought some measures of peace for the Castigline's family and friends. The Livingston County Cold Case team is to be commended for their dedication and perseverance in bringing justice to this case, no matter how long it took. Before I reveal our top 3, make sure you subscribe to this channel and give this video a like if you're enjoying the content. Number 3. DNA on sweet potato solves 12-year-old murder case in Massachusetts. This was a murder that went cold for over a decade, but the discovery of a particular piece of evidence led to a breakthrough. Todd Lampley was shot dead in his home in Hyannis, Massachusetts on February 27, 2011. And the case remained unsolved for 12 years. But now, Devereux Hampton has been charged with murder and assault with a dangerous weapon, and it's all thanks to DNA found on a sweet potato discovered at the scene. Investigators believe that the potato was used as a silencer to muffle the sound of gunshots. The potato was cut flat on one end, appeared to have a hole carved through its center, and was blown out and irregular on one end, according to an arrest affidavit from the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office. It was a bizarre piece of evidence that would ultimately lead police to their suspect. The DNA on the sweet potato was a vital clue, but investigators also uncovered other evidence that helped connect Hampton to the crime. Phone records revealed that he had exchanged more than a dozen calls and texts with a man who was in the house with Lampley at the time of the killing. Location records from a GPS monitoring bracelet that Hampton was wearing at the time of the killing also placed him in the vicinity of the house. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Hampton remained free for years. It wasn't until 2016 that authorities were able to obtain a DNA sample from him without his knowledge by collecting some of his phlegm that he spat into a puddle. An outside lab later confirmed that the DNA on the sweet potato and Hampton's spit matched. It's unclear why it took so long for Hampton to be arrested, but he was finally charged with the murder and assault with a dangerous weapon in Barnstable District County. He pleaded not guilty to both charges and is being held without bail. A probable cause of hearing is scheduled for April 5, 2023. The case may have taken more than a decade to solve, but the use of a sweet potato as a silencer is a detail that will likely stick in the minds of those following this intriguing cold case. Number 2. Daughter's DNA test unlocks decades-old cold case of mother's rape. It was a mystery that had lingered for almost 4 decades. The woman born in 1986 had grown up with severely disabled mother, who had been living in a state facility in Rochester, New York for 10 years. Her mother was nonverbal and had the mental acuity of a 2-year-old, so when she found to be pregnant, it was clear that she had been raped. The facility administrators had told the woman's family that another resident was likely responsible and had promised to file a police report and conduct an internal investigation. But as the years went by, nothing happened. No police report was ever filed, no employees were ever interviewed, and no action was ever taken. But the woman was determined to uncover the truth. She began by requesting records from municipalities and the state regarding her mother's care, and what she found was shocking. The records show that her mother had suffered a series of injuries before and during the pregnancy, including a bite mark on her breast, a cross-shaped bruise on her shoulder blade, and a 9-inch abrasion on her back. But it was the notes from one caretaker that caught her attention. The notes read, "Likes men of color, strips, sometimes yells, jumps, eats very fast." The woman was convinced that this caretaker was her father. Infuriated by what she had discovered, the woman turned to genetic testing through Ancestry.com. And that's when she found biological relatives on her father's side in Virginia. She scoured photos of the family online and identified a girl whose eyes resembled her own. She then traced the girl's father and found that he had lived in Rochester at the time of her birth. She brought her findings to the police, who confirmed that the man had worked at the facility. But too much time had passed to bring charges. The facility, it turned out, had a history of resident abuse. At least 10 staff members had been identified as pedophiles and rapists from 1976 to 1985, including supervisors, security guards, and volunteers. Several residents had died under unusual circumstances, including a 21-year-old quadriplegic patient whose body temperature spiked when he was left outside in the sun for 4 hours without fluids. Another resident died after swallowing 5 surgical gloves. The woman's mother, referred to as IC in the lawsuit, is still living in a different facility today. The woman's lawyers argued that the facility had covered up the abuse and that birth control, which had been suggested by the administrators after the pregnancy, would have served no purpose other than hiding continued abuse, given that IC did not have the mental capacity to consent. The lawsuit seeks unspecified damages, but for the woman, the most important thing was uncovering the truth. We'll probably never know how many other patients were raped at this facility, how many times our client was raped, how many other rapists there were, said one of her lawyers, and that's because the facility covered up the abuse. Number 1. Cold case solved 30 years later with DNA testing. The case had grown cold frozen in time for over 3 decades. Edis Thomas Romero's killer had evaded capture, leaving behind only a trail of unanswered questions and heartache for his loved ones. But in 2022, hope was reignited when the Mesa County Sheriff's Office turned to the advanced forensic DNA testing company, Othram, for help. The stakes were high and the pressure was on as Othram's lab began to work its magic. With cutting-edge technology and a dogged determination, they pieced together a DNA profile with hundreds of thousands of markers, meticulously uploaded to a genealogical database for law enforcement use. It was a long shot, but they knew that this was their best chance at cracking the case wide open. As the results came in, the tension in the room was palpable. The DNA had matched with a surviving family member, confirming a sibling relationship. It was the break they'd been waiting for. Romero's story began to unfold, revealing a young man who had served his country as a veteran. Before moving to Grand Junction with 2 others from Louisiana, he worked hard as a dishwasher and called a house on 4th Street home, a place that no longer stood. But it was his untimely and violent death that had haunted those he knew and that had loved him. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of cold cases. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. We appreciate your support and can't wait to bring you more thrilling content in the future.